open air, webcasting live from SOAS, University of London.
So welcome again to this issue of Random Sessions. As you might know, this show usually portrays the music of the African diaspora in the Americas. But today is a special occasion, and we are delighted to welcome anthropologist Sidney Mintz. Professor Mintz is one of the few researchers that started serious anthropological studies in the Caribbean, and in particular analyzed the role of the slavery system in the conformation of peasant societies in the Caribbean. He has also done a lot of research in other issues, including Afro-American culture and also the study of migrations and food, which is the reason why he is at SOAS today. Sidney, if I may, started his career in the 1940s and conducted fieldwork in 3 regions of the Caribbean. And these regions were Puerto Rico, in which he worked in between 1948 and 1949, Jamaica in 1952-1954, and on and off in Haiti between 1958 and 1959, and I'm sure some other days. His research in these areas were published in several articles and books, such as Caribbean Transformations and Sweetness and Power, the Place of Sugar in Modern History, which are already among classic references in the study of the Caribbean societies. Professor Mintz, it is a very funny coincidence that although this interview is not necessarily being broadcasted as we speak, we are recording it today, 12th of October. Will this be enough to get you started to talk?
Well, perhaps what you really want to know is whether I was born in 1492. Of course, it's a very important day, the Dia de la Raza,
yes,
and has special symbolic significance, particularly to those societies in the Caribbean that are not Hispanophone, because they too were discovered and their cultural paths have been so divergent over the centuries.
Now, reading through your books, and I must say I haven't had the chance to read all your books. One interesting point was how you approach the agriculture and the beginning of a peasant society in the Caribbean, and how that basically founded or gave the foundations to a capitalist structure in a way long before the Industrial Revolution. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, the real impetus to develop an export agriculture was in the hands much more of the North Europeans than of the Spaniards. Though the Spanish held the Caribbean region, it was really a Spanish lake from 1492 until the 1620s. In the 1620s, Northern Europe, in the form of Britain and France and the Netherlands, began to challenge Spanish hegemony and began to bite off territorially pieces of the islands in order to establish plantations. And their intention was not religious conversion, it was not finding metallic wealth. What they wanted to do was to produce something they could export to Europe and from which they could profit. And the magic crop, the crop that turned out to be most important, was of course sugarcane, which Columbus had brought to the Caribbean on his 2nd voyage. Even though it was the Spaniards who had brought the plantation and slaves and the sugarcane to the islands in really before 1515, in 1516 Santo Domingo shipped sugar to Cadiz. And even so, Spain had no serious interest as an imperial power in the production of commodities, and that was left to Spain's enemies, to the northern countries, who from 1620 on began to develop the plantation as an industrial form.
We don't need the was it too high, the voice?
Let me have a listen to you while you do that. You just deal with the show, I'll monitor it.
So shall I just stop?
Yeah.
Just so I don't make a mistake, your fieldwork in Puerto Rico was between 1948 and 1956?
1948 to 1949.
Okay, that's it. Then Jamaica 1952, 1954?
Yes, 2 separate summers.
And Haiti 1958 to 1951, and then 61?
1958, 59, and then later, several later occasions in summer times.
Right. I'll just mention them, then
Yeah.
you can... Now, can you talk to us about your experiences doing field work back in the 1940s, and especially about the life history of Taso, Anastasio Sayas Alvarado?
Yes. Well, I began my field work in Puerto Rico in January of 1948, and I was commissioned or told to pick out a sugarcane growing community in which to live and in which to work. And I went to the south coast of Puerto Rico because corporate sugar production was most developed there, all the way from Guánica in the west to Guayama, Salinas and Guayama in the east. That whole southern coast was irrigated, and almost all of the land was held in large corporate holdings by American corporations. There were several big Puerto Rican corporations as well, particularly Serrayes, people who produced Don Q rum. But except for that family, most of those corporations were North American. And I settled in a village near, really in the sugarcane, but near those communities. And among the friends I made there was this very man to whom you referred, Anastasio, or Eustaquio, his nickname, his apodo was Taso. And I took to him immediately. We liked each other from the start. He became a friend and a guide, and over time a dear and trusted friend, probably my best friend ever. And Taso, some years later, was willing to allow me to sit with him and to take down his life history. And it was really my second book. My first was a study of the community. My second was his life history. And he'd lived through really the immediate after effects of the American occupation on that part of Puerto Rico, and the establishment of these enormous plantations, and the swallowing up of all the little haciendas that had preceded them. And his life, in a funny way, was a counterpoint to the general social and economic history of the south coast of Puerto Rico. He worked with me carefully. He wanted his name to appear on the book. He wanted his story to be his story and not to be disguised or hidden. There was no pseudonym. The book appeared in 1960. We split royalties, which were not much, for the next 20 years. In early 1980s, the book was translated into Spanish. It's now a standard textbook at the University of Puerto Rico. It's read by nearly every student there now, because now it's become ancient history. Sugar is practically gone from Puerto Rico, but Taso's story still lives. He left us in the mid-90s at the age of 88, and I was not there. I was teaching at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, but friends of mine went to the funeral. I have a video of the funeral. He was buried with Santa Biblia under one hand and his own book under the other. And when the Spanish edition appeared, we sat together and co-signed copies for admirers. He was a remarkable man with a luminous intellect and enormous insight and a good sense of humor. And we were dear, dear friends for half of my life and almost half of his.
Right. Funnily enough, I will play for you some